So this is our third session of the Manager Studio for this school year. And our guest today is Karen Kaplan, the Chairman and CEO of Hill Holiday Group. I want to begin by giving you a little bit of background from her bio, and then we'll do 45 minutes of interview and 45 minutes of Q&A with you, so get your questions ready. Karen Kaplan joined Hill Holiday as a receptionist, hoping to save enough money for law school. 3 decades later, she's had just about every job there is to have at an agency, gaining valuable insight into how to approach each business challenge with a fresh perspective. She's been a key player in Hill Holiday's significant growth as a national powerhouse. Karen is now Chairman and CEO overseeing the network of 3 agency brands, Hill Holiday, Irwin Pendant, and Trillia Media. With an executive team composed of over half women, Karen is also one of the few female agency chairmen in the country. Honored by both Business Insider and Ad Age as one of the most influential women in advertising, she's helped the agency develop a proven ability to help brands fight a daily share battle in the noisiest categories. The proof lies in the successes of key clients, including Bank of America, Dunkin' Donuts, Johnson & Johnson, and John Hancock. She's been featured in numerous publications, including Ad Age, Adweek, Forbes, Fortune, Huffington Post, and Inc., and is a sought-after speaker appearing on stages, television, and radio outlets around the country. She serves on the boards of directors for numerous civic and professional organizations, and is a trustee of Fidelity Investments, Strategic Advisors Funds, and a director of Michael's Stores. Please join me in a warm welcome for Karen Kaplan. So I always begin these interviews with my first question kind of relates to a famous commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave, where he said you can only connect the dots looking backward. And so when you think about the path you've taken to get to this point, what are the most memorable experiences or moments that have influenced the path of your career?
Well, so just a little aside, is for those of you who haven't seen that commencement speech, I was honored to be asked to give a commencement speech a couple years ago at Curry College, and so I said, well, let me Google best commencement speeches, and I made the mistake of watching that, and then I was completely intimidated. But it's an amazing, for those of you who haven't seen it, it kind of made the rounds when he gave it, and then it made the rounds again when he passed. But it's an amazing speech. So anyway, for me, I had a very long career, obviously, and there were these punctuation points, and I learned from everything I do. But for me, interestingly, the first job I had, the receptionist job, which kind of, I think I was anticipating it was just going to be this low impact kind of 9-to-5 job that I would have till I'd saved up enough money for law school, so I wasn't super committed when I took the job. But it turned out to be one of the most important years of my career because it was this really interesting perch from which to study people. And at the time, we're on 5 floors now and we're in multiple offices, but at the time, all the core parts of Hill Holiday's business were on 1 floor. And this was before the internet, this was before voicemail, this was before the fax machine. So really the phone was the only way to communicate. And so that was sort of my, I wasn't a switchboard operator, so I didn't answer all the calls that came in, but if somebody wasn't at their desk and they needed to be found for the phone call, whether from a family member or a client or whatever, it would come to me and I would page them, and then I would connect, kind of, not very sophisticated system. But I interacted with everybody, every client, everybody's family, everybody in the agency, and Jack Connors, who I think has been retired since 2006, but I think he's fairly well known, particularly around here, was a big presence even when I started, which he had just turned 40 when I started, so he's a relatively young man, but he literally, presidents, kings, nuns, CEOs, everybody, politicians, everybody would come to see him. So I got to know everybody in town, and I really was able to study people and observe and sort of, did I want to spend serious time at Hill Holiday? Yes. What department did I want to be in? What did I want my career path to be? So surprisingly, that first year was a really important year for me. And then, I always say the second job of all the jobs I've had was the hardest to get because, again, before the internet, the second job for a woman anyway was secretary. Not like executive assistant, but really secretary, and you had to have secretarial skills. So you had to go to school and learn how to really, really type fast and not like the way people type today, looking at the keys, hunting and pecking. By the way, I still have to look at the keys. I've taken multiple typing classes, but you had to take shorthand, and it was like a very sophisticated, specific skill set. So I got rejected 3 times for that second job after the reception desk, and finally there was one job. It was traffic assistant. So traffic is kind of like project management today. So there was an assistant in the department. There was very little typing. There was one thing called the traffic sheet that had to be typed, updated, Xerox, collated, stapled in on everybody's desk by 8:30 every Monday morning. And when I interviewed for the job, so I'd been rejected 3 times, and I'd kind of gotten smart. And when the person who became my boss, the manager of the department, said, can you type? I didn't lie, but I said, can I type? And I got the job. So then I had to figure out how I was going to get this traffic sheet. It was 16 pages, double-sided. I had to figure out how I was going to get this thing done because we had one weighing word processor for the entire agency, which was out in the hall outside of my boss's office. So I'm like, she thinks I can type. So I would go in on Saturdays and type it. Took me all day. It was and then I would go in on Sundays and Xerox it and get it on everybody's desks. And so one of the first Sundays, I'm in the office going to copy it, and I turn on the copier, and I'm waiting, and it's warm. You got to wait for it to warm up, and it was a beautiful day, and I wanted to get outside, whatever. And the thing warms up, and it's jammed. And I have a very strong sense of social justice, and I want to. I'm sort of like, who would deign to leave the Xerox machine jammed on a Friday night and go home and not clear it? So I open it up, I'm flipping all the little orange levers, and then I finally find the piece of paper that's jammed, and it's around the drum, and it's this accordion, toasty, burnt along the edges. I pull it out, I put it on top of the Xerox machine, and I smooth it out, and it is the salaries of all the senior executives in the company, all the officers. And I made $12,500 at the time. And I thought if I ever made $15,000, I would be on Easy Street. And so my parents, I come from very humble beginnings, and I did not know people in the world made 6 figures, all in 1 year. And I thought, not that I'm all about money, but I thought, wow, I just kind of was that moment where the light bulb switched on, and I thought, I could have a career here. I could make a life here. And it was sort of the moment that I kind of pushed the door open and saw all the possibilities. And then all along the way, I was sort of famous for raising my hand and volunteering for anything, whether I knew how to do it or not, and sort of figured it out on the way. And then just the other sort of really formative year for me was 2001. And it was my first agency-wide position, sort of management position agency-wide, and I had been promoted in January of 2001 to, I think it was managing director was the title of the Boston office. And I inherited somebody else's forecast who had left the agency, a revenue forecast. It was, when I got a look at it, I realized just based on my accounts that I had run, it was completely unrealistic. So we had committed to this revenue forecast to our parent company, and we had to figure out how to deliver it. And so I thought, well, this is going to be a rough ride. And then that was January. In February, the dot-com bubble burst, which we were heavily reliant on tech business. Everybody was at the time. And that was like, poof, a whole book of business disappeared. And then in July, we lost one of our biggest clients. And then September 11th happened. And so that year was really a difficult year. That was kind of my management boot camp. And I thought, if I can do this, and frankly, I didn't really have the skills. I was still learning. So I would say, of all the experiences, those were sort of
So you run this really successful company in the marketing space. Are there any notable setbacks or failures that played a role in how your career unfolded?
I mean, every day. It's our business, the way we grow is we pitch competitively against other agencies. And my former boss, Jack Connors, used to say that even the best hitter in baseball, Ted Williams, struck out 6 out of 10 times. And so I would say it's even harder. You probably win 2 in 10 new business pitches. So you get really used to failure in my business. And so it's this interesting, you got to have this interesting mix of confidence and humility because, 1 in 5 times you're going to fail. And so you got to figure out, you got to figure out how to get over it in 24 hours. And what do you learn from it? So I heard somebody say once, you either win or you learn. I think that's a great frame, for particularly my business, but probably for any business. So you have to, of course, like many of you, watched the governor's first State of the Commonwealth speech. And he said something that really resonated with me, which was, don't be surprised when you're surprised. Don't be surprised when you get surprised. And he was talking about his first year, which started with the snow and, so on and so forth. So I feel like don't be surprised when you fail. Don't, everything's iterative. And one of the, when I was promoted to chairman and CEO in May of 2013, I made very few changes, sort of cultural changes, because I think we have a very special culture. One of them, though, was I do believe our culture was a little punitive, and so I think people were afraid to fail. And that is the worst thing in my business, because it's all about ideas, and you want people to put themselves out there, and no great ideas come from a place of fear. And so if you have a punitive culture and people are afraid to fail, you don't get their best ideas and their best work. And so for me, I really wanted to introduce this cultural shift around it being okay to fail, and that failure is just part of a process that you should expect.
So you've intimated already that Jack Connors is an important person in your career.
Yes.
And maybe he's the answer to this question, but who are the individuals that have the greatest influence in your life?
Yeah.
And what are a few of the insights or lessons you learned along the way?
Yeah, for sure, Jack. Although earlier than that, my parents both played a really influential role in different ways. My mother, my parents are like hand in glove. My dad just turned 86, my mom's 83, and they're like, I think they started very complementary. They say opposites attract, but over the years you kind of grow to fit better together. But my mom is very intellectual, and I always say she was my I believe in you person, and everything I did was great, and she always said you can do it, you can do anything, and she's very curious. She still takes classes at the local college where she lives, and she's all about learning, and my dad is more like physical. He was a great athlete. He can fix anything, just sort of more that sort of skill set. But my dad taught me, so where my mom taught me confidence and to believe in myself, my dad taught me humility. My father used to say this thing that I never understood until I was a grown-up. kind of a grown-up, but he used to say all the time, I would run home with like a straight A report card or some sports achievement, and he would say, Karen, a pat on the back is just 6 inches from a kick in the butt. And I never understood it. I thought, well, he's not being very supportive. And, I realize now that he never wanted me to get too accustomed to success. It's the everybody gets a trophy thing, because you're going to fail. You're not always going to be successful. And you have to sort of be prepared for that inevitable failure and what you're going to learn from it. So my parents taught me very complementary skills. And then, of course, Jack, again, as I said, when I started at Hill Holiday, I didn't really have a view to, advertising wasn't what I really was focused on, or even Hill Holiday, but, there was an energy and a vibe, and, he defined the culture. There were 4 founders in 1968, and then there were 3, and then there were 2, and then there was 1, but he was always the driving force behind the agency and sort of what it stood for and what it meant to work there and what the culture was. And so for me, I learned everything about business from observing Jack, and I had a lot of other great mentors along the way. But I tell the story when he hired me to be the receptionist. He said, and again, I'm not sure how committed I was to advertising as a career. I thought this is just going to be a year. And he said, something that changed the way I looked at that job and every job I've had since. He said, congratulations, Karen, you are now the face and the voice of Hill Holiday. And I thought, wow, he's, that's serious. He's taken this very seriously. That's an important job. And because it was important to him, it suddenly became important to me. And I looked at, I said, there and then I said, I'm going to consider myself the CEO of the reception desk. And it affected my performance on the reception desk, and it affected every job that I had after that. So every department I ran, every account I ran, every job I had, I considered myself the CEO of that. And I told that story when I got promoted to CEO in 2013, and now people at the agency, like our current receptionists, say they're the CEO of the reception desk, and I hear people use that phrase. So everything from literally my interview forward, Jack taught me a lot about philanthropy and giving back and sort of taking care of your clients and your fellow employees and your community, and just an extraordinary guy to learn from.
So moving to how you manage your organization, how would you describe your management and leadership style, and what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way?
Well, it's interesting. I've had the luxury, I often say I feel sorry for people who come in as CEOs of organizations that they haven't worked in, because it must be kind of intimidating, and, you got to sort of figure out, okay, well, who wanted the job that didn't get it, and what's going on over here. And I grew up at Hill Holiday, and so I've had every job, as you said. I have walked a mile in everybody's shoes. So I think just by definition, my style is pretty empathetic, because I know what it's like to go through, whatever, you name it. And, for me, I never ask anybody to do anything that I haven't done myself. And again, I think that's a real luxury, to be able to lead the agency or the firm that I grew up in. But I always, I always talk about great leaders are more impressed by what they don't know than what they know. So, you can't be sort of this know-it-all kind of a leader. And I learn from people all the time who report to me, and levels and levels and levels down. So I talk about this in the kinds of employees that I look for, but I hold myself accountable to this. Being curious, open, and collaborative. So those 3 things will take you very far in life. So of course you need like certain technical skills or whatever, but I think curious, open, and collaborative will transcend any profession that you choose and any company that you choose to go to. So curious in terms of, as I said, wanting to learn, constantly keeping your eyes open and wanting to learn, and not thinking that you know everything. and that you have all the answers just because you're the boss. Open is sort of open to different ways of doing things. I mean, if I held everybody accountable to doing things the way I would do them, that's all I would be doing all day. I would be running around criticizing people. It would never happen. And so just being open to different ways of doing things, we hold diversity very dear, not just in terms of ethnicity, race, gender, but, geography and types of experiences. We hire people from outside of advertising all the time. We have ex-professional athletes, we have ex-stand-up comedians, we have med school dropouts, we have, Hollywood publicists, we have people from who've had all different experiences. I quote these people and I can never remember who, but I read, it was somebody in my business said, everybody brings their, different building blocks to work. And if you have people who have diverse sets of building blocks, then you can really have fun at work and make things that are unique and different and never been done before. So, and then collaborative, I think, our business has always relied on collaboration, but I think today every business, if you can't collaborate, I don't see how you can be successful. So that's my style.
So you served as president for more than a decade, and CEO since 2013. What have you learned about what it takes to build and run a successful organization?
So for me, and we spend a lot of time, my team and I, on process and structure and organization, and that stuff is really important. But for me, it's all about talent. And again, I can only speak for my business, my industry, because I've never worked in another, but I do have sort of, I do have this interesting window into all these different types of cultures and businesses and industries, because our clients go from, banks and insurance companies to coffee and donuts and everything in between. So I just completely lost my train of thought.
That's all right. So what have you learned about building and running a successful organization?
Right. So for me, so I was making the point that it's all about talent and the people. And for me, in terms of, it doesn't matter what the economy's like and what the unemployment rate is. It's always hard to find great people. And so you really have to spend a lot of time getting the right people and retaining them, keeping them happy, and sort of creating, in an industry process that's again, sort of about putting your ideas, your sort of naked, raw ideas out there for people to, I always say we sell the most subjective thing in the world. We sell ideas. You have to have a level of confidence, but there's also a level of insecurity just around being able to do that. So you have to kind of create this sort of sense of emotional security for people. So finding people, retaining people, creating the environment where they can do their best work. I think it's all about people.
So that's a good lead into the culture of the company. So tell me about the culture of Hill Holiday and the role that culture plays in how you lead the organization.
Yeah, so you've all heard the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast or lunch or dinner, whatever it is, but I think it's really true. And people ask me about the culture. We were chatting about this a little bit before. People ask me about the culture, and it's sort of, I struggled with that question for a long time, because growing up at Hill Holiday, it's just like the air I breathe. I don't know. But for me, I think you can tell a lot about a company's culture and values by what they celebrate. And so we have an annual meeting and anniversary party every June, and we have a bunch of awards that we give people. And so that, to me, is the easiest way to define our culture, is to tell you what we celebrate. So we have, every year we have a young speaker, and that is a very high honor. That's somebody that I handpick, usually somebody in their 20s, and I tell them 3 weeks before. We figured out 3 weeks is the optimal time, because if you give them any more than that, they just throw up every day. And if you give them any less than that, they don't have time to prepare. And so they can't tell anyone. They write their speech. They can't tell anyone. It's always a surprise. Nobody ever knows who it is. And we have the person come up and speak to the entire agency. And I was that person many, many years ago, and it was one of the defining moments of my career. But that to me, so that is about a great idea can come from anywhere. That says we're not hierarchical, great idea can come from anywhere. So that's Young Speaker. And then we have an award called the Tom Woodard Award, which is named after a gentleman who passed away from liver cancer many years ago. But it's kind of like the person who really takes good care of their peers. It's like the good guy or girl award. And that one's always also a surprise. And that person typically brings the entire agency to tears when they get up on stage and say thank you. P.S. they get a check for $10,000, which isn't bad. And so taking care of your peers is really important. And then we have something we call the Jack Award, which is named after Jack Connors, which is all about results. So it's teamwork and collaboration, it's innovation, something that has never been done before, it's degree of difficulty, but it's really focused on what was the one initiative or account or team or piece of work in all the year that did the most to enhance Hill Holiday's reputation. And so that sometimes goes to a large team, a small team, that's $50,000. So that's about the work and the results. And then I was talking about failure earlier, but I added one when I became CEO called the Epic Fail Award, which is, that goes to one person typically, and it's $5,000, and it celebrates not being afraid to fail. And what's really interesting, not to take up all the time, is that the team that won the Epic Fail Award 2 years ago won the Jack Award last year. So they had a great idea, they couldn't get it sold and produced for a variety of reasons, and they stuck with it, and they kind of pivoted and reframed it, and came back a year later and won the Jack Award. So great ideas can come from anywhere, not hierarchical, kind of taking care of the people in the agency, your peers, results, and enhancing our reputation, and then not being afraid to fail. That, to me, sort of, I think, sums up the tenets of our culture.
So you have a workforce of over 600. How do you motivate your workforce, particularly in a tight labor market, how do you keep everybody on the boat?
Yeah, so it's our business is pretty transient, people are pretty transient, so we have better retention than, the industry average, but people tend to move around in our business, so, I talked about collaboration, and it's really important to keep everybody in that boat, because if you've got sort of a team of 6 or 8 or 10 people and somebody leaves, it can throw the whole thing off, and it's, the stronger the team, the harder it is to add that new person, sort of. So some level of turnover, I think, is really healthy, frankly, because, again, it brings that diversity of thought and experiences into the agency. But I wrote this, this little piece for our industry trade publication about 2 years ago that I called "Here's to the Freaks," and so which is how I affectionately refer to the people at Hill Holiday, and they like it. So it's basically, we are not super structured, and I said not super hierarchical, and you basically, I think, have to celebrate what people want to do and explore outside of their day-to-day job. So, we have a lot of creative people who also are musicians, for example. Or we have, this is a new thing in the past 5 years, at least I've noticed it. Everybody is starting a brewery. This is like a thing. I don't know if it's just a Hill Holiday thing. We have like 8 people who started a brewery. So sometimes they'll be like, I'm leaving to start a brewery. So I'll say, well, why don't you do that at night and on the weekends and stay at Hill Holiday? And one of our guys just started a brew pub in Lynn, and I said, we'll buy a kegerator, and you can bring, you can supply us with beer, and then you have 600 built-in, brand ambassadors that will, so, whatever people are interested in outside of work, I look at not just as, kind of a way to retain them, but as a way to enhance what they do for us. Because again, the more interests you have the more experiences you have outside of work, the better the quality of your ideas, I think. So basically, we let people do whatever the hell they want.
So there have been 38 CEOs who sat in that chair, and the question that leads to the most difficult issue that CEOs face is communication. How would you describe your communication style, and what do you find works well to communicate with all the stakeholders you have to deal with?
Yeah, so you know what? It's I sort of have a very organic, or had a very organic approach to it. But the bigger the organization, so we have 600 people at El Holiday, but then we have the other two brands, Irwin Penland and Trillia. And so the bigger you get, the harder, the thing that sort of, not to be cliche, but the thing that kind of keeps me up at night the most is, as we get larger, how do we keep that sense of specialness and uniqueness of what it means to work at El Holiday? And so communication is, whenever we survey employees, no matter how much you think you're communicating, they want you to communicate more. And so Britt Dunn, who's in the front row, is my director of communications, and we decided we finally need to sort of institutionalize this. So she came to me about 3 weeks ago with a pyramid. I'm very visual, so I do better with drawings than I do with long documents with words. And she basically put this pyramid together that is about, here's the kinds of meetings that we're going to have twice a year, and here's what we're going to do 3 to 4 times a year, and here's what we're going to do 6 to 8 times a year. And so we actually have it feels to employees like it's very organic, but we do panels all the time. So we're going to do a panel right after the Super Bowl where we're going to pluck people from inside the agency who are not the most senior people, by the way. It's not always my direct reports. And I'm going to interview them, and we're going to talk about what they thought about the Super Bowl advertising, which is a big deal in my business. We just yesterday had what we call the end of the month parties, where we have beer and wine and food and snacks, and we share a piece of work, important announcements, where we all, so it's very easy to send out work in a link for everybody to see, but I like when we all see a piece of work together, because there's really that sense of a common shared experience and that sense of pride. So we never want people to see our work on TV or online or in the different channels. We want them to see it together as a family. So there are things that I talked about our big meeting. So we have, sort of a whole system that I hope to people in the agency feels very organic. And then my direct reports have meetings with their direct reports, and we sort of cascade information. But I feel like, the other thing I'm very committed to, and it sounds kind of old school, but is delivering big news in person. So whether it's good or bad news, so whether we win an account or we lose an account, or something like, something important happens, I don't want to send that out in an email. I want to do that as a family. And so one of the things when we moved into our space 8 years ago, which we didn't have in our original space in the Hancock Tower, we have a room that's big enough for 800 people, standing room only, and screens that people can sort of experience everything together.
How do you spend your time at work? Is there such a thing as a day or week for you?
No, which is why I love it. There literally is no 2 days are the same. I think if that happened, I probably would have left Hill Holiday. I wouldn't have spent my whole career. But I think over the course of a year, it's safe to say that about a third of my time is spent with current clients, and I'm very committed to staying connected to our current clients, and they pay us a lot of money, and I don't ever want to get far away from the relationships that built our agency, and I'm very grateful. And I think I provide, it's funny I used to think, well, if you don't work on an account, what kind of value can you add? Because you're not in the trenches every single day on that account. But what's interesting in my job is, we have 12, 14 clients at a time typically. So I actually have this really interesting perspective where I can see commonalities from industry to industry. And not just sort of, we have financial service clients and retail clients and healthcare clients, but there are, for example, what's going on in healthcare today? Financial services went through 30 years ago whenever the 401k was introduced. It's the exact same thing, going from defined benefits to defined contribution. Exact same thing. So I can draw analogies, and I think I can provide value on a certain level that somebody in the trenches can't. But I love the work. I always want to stay close to the work. So about a third is current clients. A third is business development. So as I said, the way we get new businesses, we compete. So we're constantly pitching, and that I kind of, I hate it and I love it. It's terrifying, but it's exhilarating. So that's about a third of my time. And then a third is sort of, I don't know, I would call it administrative stuff.
So related to that, what part of your job do you like the most, and what part do you like the least?
I should have been prepared for that question, Bob.
For the most part, should be easy.
The most is I like the work. I can't even say, I love the people. I love my clients. I love the people that work at Hill Holiday. I love the sort of the it's given me like kind of a voice and a podium that I can use for good in the community. That I would never have been in a position. I had a pretty modest upbringing, as I mentioned. I love the work itself. I love advertising. And it's so much more interesting now than, it used to be a snooze before the internet came along. It was like TV, radio, outdoor print, whatever. Now it's like every day there's a new channel. Literally every day there's a new channel. So it's like you're constantly learning. The least, you get your heart broken. We lose business that for no good reason. And believe me, I'm not one of those people who's like, that wasn't fit. I like interrogate when people fire us, which is inevitable, or we don't win a pitch. I interrogate them because I want to learn. I want to learn and I want to get better, and you can always get better. So, but you swing and miss more than you hit. And so for me, there's a heartbreak to it. It's a very emotional business. So the heartbreak, I guess.
If you could go back in time with the knowledge and experience you have today, are there any particular skills you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
I would have worn sunscreen. I'm not kidding. It was all good. I feel like I had so many opportunities to learn. So when I was coming up during the 80s, we were in this very high growth mode. We were sort of in startup mode, and we were founded in '68, but we didn't really get going until early to mid '80s. And it was like, here, hold this. I had an inordinate amount of responsibility as a very young person, and so, which is kind of interesting because even when agencies are more mature and not in that high growth mode, I think it's a business that offers a lot of responsibility to young people. It's not like super hierarchical, like, you have to do this for 2 years and then we'll see if you can do that for 2 years, and then you can just, if you're good, you can just,
Just a few personal questions before I turn you over to the students. How do you relax in your personal time? Do you have a special place to recharge?
Yeah, I'm not a big relaxer. I like to be home. I just love to be home. I'm never home, so I love to be home. Like, home is, if I have nothing to do, I recently became an empty nester, and so I discovered this new thing called fiction. I don't know if any of you heard of it. So, I turned into this, I wouldn't read anything that wasn't like specific learning and contributing to my skill set, that was going to win me another piece of business or get me promoted. Or I was very mercenary about it, and so I never allowed myself the luxury. And I'm big on popular culture because I think it's imperative to my business. So you have to keep up on music and style and film, and this, culture influences what we do for a living, and what we do for a living, if it works right, influences culture. But fiction is like one of those luxuries I never afforded myself. So now I read like a book every other day. It's crazy. I'm very happy. So I like silence, home, very simple.
You feel like you've had to make sacrifices to be at this level?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, so my kids are 25 and 22. And, I worked, other than a couple of 4-month maternity leaves, I always worked full time, and it's a crazy business, and every business is a crazy business. But I would worry about that, but, I would sort of catch myself getting anxious about it, and then I would step back and trying to be objective, which of course you can't really do with your kids, but I would take a step back and I would look at my kids, and I would see how they were doing in school and socially, and like, they're really good kids. Like, even other people tell me they're good kids. It's not just me. And they're successful. And so, if anything, I used to joke about, like, back burner. Like, I used to say, like, your kids are on the front burner, and then, your job, and then your spouse, and then, like, your parents, and then, like, you're out of burners. Like, I'm, like, on the floor. Like, there's no... So if anything, I said I probably didn't get enough sleep. Didn't have enough downtime. Like I was, but I don't think I'm any worse for the wear.
So if you get to choose a career outside of the one you have as your next act, what would it be?
My mother thought I was going to be a talk show host, like Oprah. And you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. I mean, that'd be pretty good. I want to be Ellen. That's what I would want to be. I'd want to be Ellen.
Okay.
Of course, I have no talent, but I never, you said, that's a total fantasy. But.
There we go. So I think it's time to turn it over to the students, who I know are going to have many questions for you. Just need the first brave soul to start out.
First question's always the hardest. Are you calling?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Harry from Indonesia. First of all, I appreciate it that you can come here.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. First is, in the creative business, what is your major strategy to compete with your competitors? Because it's very wide and it's very subjective. So my background is also in the creative business as well, so I really want to know your insight about it. And the second one, you say a lot about people. I mean, I can really relate to your style of leadership. But how do you make them not to be like that, too close to you? So it might cloud your business judgment. Yeah,
okay, that's a great question. So the first question you kind of answered with the second question, so it's people, there's the only difference between, it's funny, as much as it breaks my heart to do this, to think this, I did this exercise where, we were thinking about how our agency was positioned and what differentiates us, and, you got to get like your elevator spiel down for pitches and things. And so I went on every agency I admired in the country, in the world's website, and they all say the same thing. We're a multi-integrated service and work that makes it different, drive business. It's all the same. So really the only difference is people. You have people who are smarter, better, more curious, more open, work together better. They enjoy working with each other. They enjoy working with clients. I mean, that's how you win. And so part of it is the quality of the ideas, and part of it is just, what's it like to work with these people? Am I going to enjoy working with these people? Your second question, it's very funny. I like, Britt knows, like I do this little thing, sort of somewhere on that pyramid is, I call it cocktails with the coach. It started as coffee with the coach, but I used to do it in the morning and no one would say anything, so I switched it. I had this brilliant insight. I switched it to the end of the day, and we have beer and wine. And I just call 3 or 4 random people. I don't know if HR picks them, or I don't even know how they get selected, and some of them are new, some of them have been working in Hollywood for a while. They're all different departments. And I mean, that may be my favorite thing, and I'll do it once a month if I can. But we just sit in my office, no agenda, and I say I have no filter. I will tell you anything, ask me anything, and I always am asking them for ideas, and so I find having that distance makes it really difficult for me personally. So I don't know. Maybe if I left till holiday and went to be a CEO in a different company, I would want a little more distance, but it's kind of, that's part of what I think, that's maybe part of my leadership style, so. Thank you. Good question. Somebody have one down here? Yes.
Hi, Karen. I'm Jeff. Thanks.
Hi, Jeff.
You talked about your business impacting culture and culture impacting business. Could you think of one instance where your team, Bill Holiday, really had an impact on culture based on some work that you did that really, you look at that and say, that was us, that was awesome?
Well, that's our goal for everything we do, and it's easier today because things are shareable, and people weren't able to share anything. So the ideal, I'm trying to think of something that's more recent that really kind of ricocheted through culture. I mean, I will say it's not a specific campaign, but America Runs on Dunkin' as a strategic platform. What we call the Dunkin' Tribe. And there's Starbucks people and there's Dunkin' people and there's zero overlap. And so we came up with that platform 10 years ago because we did a lot of we did a deprivation study, for example. We took Dunkin' loyalists and we made them they could only go to Starbucks for a couple weeks and vice versa. And people just stopped drinking coffee. The Dunkin' people, we actually did a commercial which was we called it Fritalian, that the only sort of directly competitive commercial we ever did for Dunkin' since 1998, because it came out of that study where people are lined up trying to order in something that looks like a Starbucks, and is it French, is it Italian, perhaps Fritalian, they can't. But the Dunkin' people really, they were like getting a rash, like they couldn't order, they just like abandoned ship, they ran out of and then the Starbucks people were like, where do you sit down? These hard pink and orange chairs, and they don't want you to sit down in Dunkin'. It's grab and go, you're busy. And so I will say amongst the Dunkin' tribe, which is pretty mass, people who have this kind of a noble idea about keeping they are the people who keep the country running, and Dunkin' is the fuel that keeps them running. Everything we do for Dunkin' resonates so much with that tribe. So again, it's not everybody. And I'll say, just because I was thinking back to that time, around the same time, around 2006, we did work for Liberty Mutual, which was about responsibility. And it's not running anymore, so I don't know if any of you guys remember that or were alive. Kidding, it's a joke. But we did some research. This was during the pitch. We identified this insight during the pitch. So we did this. We did all these interviews, and actually, I was just talking with somebody about Hurricane Katrina, which is amazing. That was 10 years ago. I know you all did. There was like a New Orleans service trip I was hearing about. Anyway, we did executive interviews during the pitch amongst the CEO and the presidents of the different businesses within Liberty Mutual, and Katrina had just happened. And we heard from the president at the time of the personal markets business, like the retail business, what you would buy for homeowners insurance. And he was telling us stories about how their adjusters were down in the field in New Orleans, and they were trying to help people who weren't even Liberty Mutual customers. And what we heard from every executive was that they do the right thing. It was this sense of responsibility, like beyond business parameters. And then we did this research amongst customers or potential customers, and we got this statistic. It was something like 94% of people in the United States think they're more responsible than the average American, which is like mathematically impossible, but a really good, that we knew we were onto something. And by the way, responsible people make better insurance customers because they lock their doors, They have gates around their pools. They wear their seatbelts. So they end up being more profitable. And there was this giant pool of people because it was 94%. And so we did something very different at the time for property and casualty insurance, which is really more of a direct marketing, sort of a 15 minutes can save you 15% or more. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Geico proposition and Progressive, like, an acquisition model that they use their marketing. And we just celebrated responsibility. And we did this first spot we did, which was this beautiful anthem spot that ran on television that was, it was just about paying it forward. And we created, and this was early days of social media, really early days, 2007, 8 maybe. And we created this platform that called the Responsibility Project that didn't try to sell anybody anything. It just celebrated stories about responsibility and attracted people who would be attracted to this value proposition around responsibility. So I can't think of a more recent example, but we just launched. It was actually supposed to launch at Valentine's Day, and a publication, one of our trade publications, Ad Week, wanted to publish it. So anyway, go online. It's, I don't know the website, but it's Necco Sweethearts, and it's this video of a gay couple who have been together 55 years, and that this is the first Valentine's Day they can celebrate as a married couple. And it's this lovely little video, and on the website we are asking people to share their stories. And there's no paid media behind it. And it's kind of ricocheting around right now. So. Yes, I'm favoring this side. Sorry, I'll get to you.
Hi, I'm Justin. Thank you again for coming.
Hi.
I'm curious about your people and talent strategy, since you said it all boils down to your talent. How can you be sure you're finding the best talent? A lot of us are going through an interview process now and feel like we're being evaluated on these questions, like your answer to how have you overcome an obstacle. It seems a little bit arbitrary. So what's your strategy for finding the best people?
Okay, so now I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like. It's a crapshoot. I mean, it's a trial and error for you and for the employer. I mean, it really is. So it's like you go on 2 dates and then you get married. Like, sometimes it doesn't work. So there's 2 things. One is I've been married for 33 years. So one is getting the right people, getting the best people, I should say. And like that's half of the battle, but then there's getting the people who will be able to thrive in your culture, and that's even trickier because you want people who will. I sort of stopped myself from using the word fit. So it has to be a fit, but you kind of want a little bit of. You want people who are going to push it and challenge people. So you don't want everybody. You don't want it like super comfortable, because so that's the diversity. The diversity of background, diversity of thought, diversity of geography. So you want people who are going to make you better and push, but you want people who are going to be successful. We haven't been doing this as much. I guess we do it. We have for undergrads, we have an internship program. We have about 100 interns, about 40 in the summer, and then during the different semesters. And we hire probably 20% of those interns. And for the first time this year, we made offers in October to the last year's summer interns. Because what we're seeing is people are, this again is undergrad, people are getting job offers earlier and earlier. It used to be like they graduated and then started looking in May, and now it was the finance people first. Now it's like even in our business. But what I'm seeing, and again, we're not doing this other than in the internship program where we have them compete. They do sort of a mock pitch, and you can really see how they do, the quality of their ideas, their ability to communicate, but really importantly, their ability to collaborate, because they're in groups of 5, and they're thrown together, and it's like an 8-week program, so they don't have all this time to. But what I'm seeing is I don't know if you guys get like assignments, like you're given assignments to do, sort of, you know, my daughter is she's graduating in May from USC in LA from the business school, but she, undergrad, but she just interviewed and got an offer for a job to be in Gap Inc. headquarters in San Francisco, and they have like a rotational management program, very well regarded. She had 8 days to create a new brand, not a line extension, so like a Intermix Athletica, Banana, you know, Old Navy, Gap, like a whole nother brand. And then she had to do all the financials, a complete marketing plan in 8 days, and it was in the middle of her midterms. And she called me and said, Mom, I'm reading the annual report, and they don't break out the financials by brand, so how am I supposed to project? She's an undergraduate. So of course I said to Elizabeth, that's nuts. Just forget it. But, you know, she did it, and of course she did it, and of course she got the job, but and when she got there and presented it, the guy said, oh, we didn't expect you to do all the 4 parts or whatever it was. We just wanted to see what people are interested in. So I think there's got to be a better way. And, you know, maybe giving people projects and assignments to do gives you a little bit of a better idea than where do you see yourself in 5 years. I don't ask any of those kinds of questions, by the way. I ask, like, you know, similar to the questions that Bob, you know, what's the best thing, what's the best day, what's the worst day? Like, what do you stand for? What's your worldview? Like, I don't really care what you did. I want to know how you think. So, but I will say, I think there's got to be a better way. Yeah, sorry. Yes. Oh, did you?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Sean.
Thank you.
I used to work in advertising, so I'm curious what you think about the trend of companies moving their advertising in-house.
Yeah, it's a very interesting trend. I mean, there's a lot of sort of what look like troubling trends on the surface for our business, but I will say, and retailers have done this for many, many years. So locally, TJX, Staples, retailers have always had a very robust internal agency for some of the work and not all of the work. So part of it is actually good for agencies because it lets you focus on where you can really add value and, you know, doing more of the transactional stuff. They can do that cheaper internally. I think it's really hard for, there's still a little bit, I'm going to sound like a snob now, so you'll have to forgive me, but there's still a little bit of a stigma for particularly creative people to work at a company in an in-house agency, but I think that's going to go away because I think there's more stability. I think there's more control. It's, you know, probably less heartbreak because you're not spending a third of your time pitching new business. Yeah, but, you know, I'll tell you this, everybody's looking to save money. Every client, every agency, every business, every category, every industry is really getting squeezed, and they're getting squeezed by their consumers, and so they have to figure out ways to save money. So, you know, I don't know that everybody in my business would say this, but I actually think it's pretty smart. And I don't know, I'm not sure I should say this. I'm not sure I would start. I would do early, like maybe that's for later in the career. Because again, as I said to you, and I think that stigma is going to go away, but there's a little bit of, you know, there's some snobbery in my business where people will get a resume and it's like, oh, in-house agency, like, so I don't know if that's why you were asking. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. It's a great pleasure to hear all of your stories.
Thank you.
So I have 2 questions for you actually. The first one is how you guys manage relationship with clients. I know Hill Holiday has many clients that you guys have stayed a long time with.
Yes.
Like Bank of America, like Dunkin' Donuts. And I know like many agencies rely on these clients to get new clients.
Yes.
I wonder, what's the secret of maintaining a relationship? And the second question is one that I've asked so many Hill Holiday people I ran into, but I guess you're most qualified to answer it.
I would be interested in how the other ones answer, whatever it is, and I don't know what you're gonna ask me, but I mean, yeah, but anyway, sorry.
Yeah, the question is, how do you see Hill Holiday in 5 years?
Yeah. Well, that question, it is impossible to predict where this business is going in 5 years, because what it's all about now is it's sort of the intersection of media and marketing and technology and really entertainment. And so particularly the technology piece, I mean, if you told me some of the channels that we would be using for clients 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, Snapchat, come on. It's like a legitimate, you get 100 million people, more than the Super Bowl, on Snapchat every day. So it's a very legitimate channel. We have so you mentioned Bank of America. They did, about a year ago, they did a collaboration with Pinterest and Vice to reach younger millennials. And so Pinterest, which, this is kind of interesting, it was lost on me till somebody pointed it out, but it's kind of very obvious. So Pinterest is pretty much the only social platform that is about intent and sort of all about what you're going to do, as opposed to every other social platform is what you just did. And so there's a lot of really rich data and insights on Pinterest about people's intentions, and of course everything costs money, and so what people are intending to do with their money. And then Vice did the content and created the show for millennials that Bank of America sponsored basically, but so Bank of America sponsored it, but insights came from Pinterest for the content, and then the content was produced by Vice. And Bank of America was able to reach a whole audience that would never have even if that was something on like a Bank of America owned channel, people would never have gone to. So, I have no idea where for me, we're gonna keep being successful, but I don't know what shape that's gonna take. And I don't think I think if any agency CEO tells you where they think the agent's gonna be in 5 years, I just don't think that's a very genuine answer. And then your other was, how do we retain our clients? So we have extraordinarily long, the average client agency relationship just keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter, to your point about in-house. And some of it's price shopping, some of it is just sort of not having the patience, sort of public companies having to see results from quarter to quarter, as opposed to, see in a year, like we'll measure what we do in years, that's getting shorter and shorter. So client agency relationships averages like 2-point-something years. And by the way, it takes a good year to optimize the staff to really make a difference, to be profitable on a piece of business. So if you're churning business every 2 years, it's not a very good formula. We have clients for decades, 10, 20, 30 years. Hancock's been a client for over 30 years. Duncan, over 20 years. The bank, Bank of America and its predecessor banks for 20 years. TJX, 25 years. Harvard Pilgrim, over 20 years. So here's the secret. I think we really care about them more than, it's a lot of agencies, it's about what kind of work can I get done for that client that will enhance my reputation, that's going to get me the next client. There's a little bit of that. Yeah, you have to be a little bit selfish, and you never want to you never want to put less than stellar work out there, because that becomes your reputation, and who wants to do that anyway? But we really take a long view, and we care about their businesses, we care about their brands, and we care about them personally. So we care about their careers. So, a CMO hires a new agency, that's a huge risk. Oh, by the way, the average tenure for a chief marketing officer maps exactly to the average tenure for a client-agency relationship. So there's a lot of risk and a lot of trust. And so I think they know we are in it for the long haul and we're really focused on their success. And I'll tell you, we're not the sexiest agency around. I always say we're better at retention than acquisition. And so we don't win as many pitches as some agencies in the country. But, and I also say to my team, there's no reason you have to pick one. You can be good at both. But if I had to pick one, I would pick retention, because the better work and the rewarding relationships come from having these long-standing relationships with your clients. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kaplan. Thank you so much for coming this evening. So my little sister works in advertising, and so when I heard that you were coming, we got excited, and as you speak of collaboration, we collaborated to
Oh, good.
some questions. I'm only back to you one, don't worry. But this question's from both of us actually, which is you've led Hill Holiday through a seismic shift in the ad agency with changes over 20 years spanning everything from how content is produced to how it's consumed. So the question is, how would you advise this generation of leaders to respond to change?
Yeah, I mean, change is, I always say everybody likes change unless it's happening to them. Change is hard for people, and this business is all about change. And a lot of times you have to lead your clients who may be a little more change averse. So agency, you don't get into the advertising business if you can't tolerate change and ambiguity. And, you don't know where your next meal is coming from. And you start off in one department, you end up in another. You start off on one account, you end up in another. You start off at one level, you end up in another. You start off in one office, you end up in another. So, okay, I just completely forgot your question. It was about leading through change. Okay, so I will say, the pace of change is literally, it feels like it doubles every single year. And you think, how can it get any quicker? And as I said to you, it wasn't as interesting a business years ago. We had like 4 channels. You did planning once a year. We literally would do planning once a year for clients. And by the way, like, it was the same as the year before. So it was a snooze. That's why I think there was so much drinking in our business. If you ever watch Mad Men, it was boring. So now you're planning cycles every day. Like, no one does annual plans. 3 to 5 year, yeah, you have that, but you're constantly iterating and changing. And, what I say to people when they interview and they get into a lot of young people say to me, I love marketing, I love advertising, I can't decide if I want to be on the client side or the agency side. So I always say, here's the litmus test. It's pretty similar, but if you are a person who has, and I'm very organized, I have like a list every day, my days are planned out, but if you're a person who, like, the phone rings and you, like, I never say to a client's like, can you come over tomorrow at 9? Well, I have 3 other things at 9, but I'm never going to say that because it's never going to be about my schedule. So you're kind of like, sure, I can come over at 9. So it just, if you're a kind of a person that gets a stomach ache when you think about, like, the upheaval to your calendar every minute of every day, go on the client side, because I think the only difference is that your schedule, frankly, is sort of respected more. So if somebody says, can you come over tomorrow at 9, and you say no, they say, well, how about 3 weeks from tomorrow? That doesn't happen on the agency side because we're in the service business. So change is sort of inherent. I think the pace of change has picked up because of technology and channels. And you mentioned, I think, the word seismic. To me, the seismic change in our business, which is driven by social media, technology, and the internet, is that it's two-way, and nobody needs to endure your commercial anymore. Nobody needs to endure your message anymore. And so you could put less than stellar work out there, and you knew how many people you were reaching theoretically, but I could be reaching you and you could be busy on your second screen, or get up for a snack, or, go off to another app or whatever. And so we talk about advertising used to be interruptive and incidental to what your principal goal was. So you were either watching television, or you were, reading an article online, or whatever you were doing, and the commercial would come, and it's incidental to what you were doing. You kind of endure it. Today, everything is choice-based. So you have to get someone to choose to consume your content. And that really raises the bar on the quality. So like the crappy stuff doesn't, I always talk about Funny or Die, to like clients, like explaining how this stuff works if they don't quite get it. So if you ever go on Funny or Die, it's literally funny or it dies. So there's no risk to sort of, you can put something out there, but the good stuff floats to the top. The bad stuff is so far down the feed that no one's ever going to see it. So you just can't put that kind of work out there. You have to put the kind of work out that people are going to choose to spend time with. And so it's got to either be useful, entertaining, it's got to give them information, or some combination, like, we talk about infotainment all the time. But, the example I like to give is when you're on YouTube and you want to watch a video, and the pre-roll comes, and it says, like, you can skip this ad in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And, like, even I skip the ad. Like, even my mother skips the ad. Like, even people in advertising skip it. So you don't want to be in a business where people have to endure what you do for a living. So I think that, if you keep in mind that what you do has to be chosen by people as opposed to just sort of this passive one way, I think that's the best way to frame it. Yes.
Ben Schaefer, thanks for coming. So can you speak to what metrics you use, especially with television, to track revenue for your clients? Just because you can talk about an impression, but an impression doesn't necessarily mean someone bought your product.
Yeah.
Same with social media, just because someone likes your product or watches a YouTube video doesn't necessarily mean they bought your product. So can you talk about what your clients hold you to say, like, especially a CMO coming to a table executive, a lot of them are coming just with a revenue number in mind to say, we spent this much in our budget and it accounted for this much in revenue. So just touching on that.
So first of all, that's a very good thing that we can now measure things we could never. So we used to use proxies. So like in the case of Liberty Mutual, unaided awareness, which is like a very easy thing to measure, without any technology. You just go in sort of before you expose somebody to your message, and then you go in after and you see if they mention, if you say how many property and casualty companies can you mention, and if they measure Liberty Mutual. So unaided awareness has been found in the property and casualty industry, and every industry is different, to have a direct, leads directly to purchase interest and quote volume. So if you can drive unaided awareness up, then you drive quote volume up, and then logically, if you drive quote volume up, you're going to sell more policies. So that's sort of the way it used to work. There was always like this kind of like loose awareness type of a metric or favorability. There was a purchase funnel that we kind of don't even talk about anymore because people come in and out of the funnel at all different times and through all different channels. But today you can really measure, so TV's the hardest. There's a lot of pressure on traditional TV metrics. So Nielsen, there's like a whole thing in our industry where people want more granular metrics around television. And television's been why would they change? They had the lion's share of the spend. And I will say that as other channels and fragmentation, kind of increased, TV viewership was decreasing, but for years, they never lowered their prices. So just in the past 2 years, the networks in particular are starting to lower their prices. And so they're getting tremendous pressure for the first time in a long time to demonstrate the business impact, however you want to measure. But digital, interactive, you can literally measure not what people like this may or may not do, but like what did you buy? So with geolocation, data, and like we know we can track what you buy, where you buy it, when you buy it, how frequently. So it's, if again, to the choice point versus incidental, if your work is effective, you welcome that data and that measurement. If it isn't, in the case of TV, and by the way, TV's a very important medium. TV's going nowhere. I mean, TV's always, it's going to change. You see fewer people are watching network TV. First, like the, cable networks were doing better than the over-the-air networks, and then, Netflix and Amazon, and you see what's happening. But clients are always gonna want to pay for a mass audience, and so digital and interactive channels are typically much more fragmented and smaller audiences. But what you can measure it depends, every client has a different set of metrics. And by the way, favorability is still a really important metric for like Bank of America. That still, they have some version of a purchase cycle, but they've got their business metrics and their business goals, but they also have reputational goals because of what they've obviously been through since 2008 and the damage done by, Countrywide and et cetera. And so they actually do, many clients have these sort of enterprise goals around reputation. Sometimes it's about employment. They want people to want to work there. Sometimes it's about people doing business with them. CSR is such a more important. CSR used to be a thing that particularly banks kind of did on the side. We'll just throw some money over here, and it wasn't. Now CSR is really connected to business. People care about what you stand for, not just what you sell. So this would turn into a hostage situation if I went into all the, there's a whole nother talk, but that's a good question. Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Amy. I'm a senior.
Hi, Amy.
Maybe, I don't know, like one of the few undergrad students or the only undergrad student. So I'm really curious about Project Beacon. I think it's a wonderful source of innovation for the agency. So I wonder, up to now, how do you guys utilize the outcome of these projects?
So it's interesting. Project Beacon we've sort of iterated. So we introduced Project Beacon, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, as a bit of an incubator. So specifically for ad tech companies. Although when we announced it, I got a call from like an oil company, but we can't help you. So ad tech companies that were not startup but early stage, where we weren't charging them anything. I think we chose 12, which was 3 times as many as we should have. But we would give them free, we would consult with them for free around fit. So ad tech startup companies are famous for struggling. Like they get all the hard stuff right, the technology, but they have a hard time figuring out what I call fit, which is like, how would I sell this to somebody? Why would a client want to use this, and how do I position it? So we are really good at that. So we would help them with that, and then they would give us early access that we would then be able to offer our clients to, different ad tech solutions that aren't yet, widely available. So that was the beginning. As I said, it was actually really exciting. It was a little bit like of a Shark Tank kind of a thing where they all came in and we picked 12, 3 times as many as we should have. We really had our hands full. They're very needy, and of course they are. So we did that for a while, and then the next iteration of Beacon was internally at Hill Holiday, our tech and innovation group, creating products and services that would either for Hill Holiday to kind of make it easier for us to do our jobs, or for our clients. So they were Hill Holiday owned, sort of innovations. And so that's where Project Beacon is today. So we've, I think initially we had designs on sort of putting our own ad tech solutions out and making money, and we had a subscription service that we launched that didn't really get any traction outside. But it was tremendously helpful for internally. So this was a couple years ago. And for some reason, I can't think of what was the Facebook. Noah's. So basically, Facebook is very difficult to work with. Any marketer, advertiser would say Facebook is very difficult to work with. So it's difficult to measure. And so this guy in our innovation technology group just built this dashboard from scratch that would track how different Facebook posts, and now we use it across all social media, but it started as Facebook, how different Facebook posts perform relative to one another. So, and like a very clean interface. So basically it was designed for creative people to use, not like heavy tech people. So you could either, it was originally designed, so say you work on Dunkin', you're a creative person who works on Dunkin', so you could compare how one post did versus another, and there were some really interesting, like simple insights that we were able to share out with every account in the agency. Like Dunkin' is a social brand, obviously, and consistently, when you show 2 cups of coffee, for example, instead of 1 cup of coffee, the post does exponentially better. So, a box of donuts versus one, like simple, and there were a million of those insights. And all these little iterative sort of improvements drove, times everything that they spend on social media, which is a lot, drove tremendous business performance and got a better return on their investment. And so that's what it was designed for. And then creative people started using it to compete. My husband and I got Fitbits this holiday season, and it's like I could not get that guy out of bed in the morning. I work out every morning. At the minute he got a Fitbit, he's like, "How many steps do you have? How many steps do you have?" So we created this competition amongst creative directors to see, whose Facebook post could get more. And then we're able to learn both on a particular account, but also we can apply those learnings to other accounts. So that's just an example, which, how can I not think of the name of this thing? Anyway, we offered that out on a subscription basis to clients, and, maybe they get it for free, so why would they sign up for it? But that's an example. So there are more digital products and services that help us do our jobs more efficiently. Yes?
Hi, thank you so much for being here. As someone who comes from advertising, who's extremely relatable and very inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
So I wanted to ask, what is one key skill that helped you get this far in your career?
Wow. Well, I have to say, you can never underestimate the importance of being willing to work really, really hard. And I would say it's pretty easy to outwork most people. And I don't mean that in a flip way, it just sort of is. And I don't know if you guys are Malcolm Gladwell fans or if anybody's read Outliers, but he talks about, he calls these people outliers. They're people who are just extraordinary at whatever it is they do. And he talks about there's like a level of smart that you're smart enough, and then beyond that, it doesn't really make a difference. And so what really makes a difference is determination and practice and hard work. And so he talks about, the Beatles and how they, talks about this concept of 10,000 hours. Do you guys know about this? It's 10,000. So he talks about like the Beatles, most bands play 1 to 2 gigs a week, couple hours a gig, and they played 8 hours a day, 7 days a week in a strip club in Hamburg when they were really, really young. So by the time they came to the States, they had got to 10,000 hours, which, typically takes 10 years to get to sort of excellence in any. And he talks about Larry Bird, and he talks about Bill Gates, and he talks about Steve Jobs, and he studies hockey players, and the difference is determination and hard work. So, which anybody can, it's not that hard. Yeah.
Hi, I'd like to add my thanks as well. It was very inspiring to hear your story of your rise to the CEO. I was wondering if you felt that you might have had some additional additional challenges as a woman and how you might overcome those?
Well, yeah, so I think, so I definitely did, but I think it's better now. I don't think it's, so here's my thoughts on that. I always say, I went on vacation a couple years ago and I read, again, not fiction, I read 3 books in a week. I read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. I read Arianna Huffington's, the book before her sleep book. Anyway, it's like about leap of faith or something, I forget what it's called. And I read Tina Fey, Bossy Pants. So I kind of read like 3 kind of biographies. And they all have completely different worldviews. 3 very accomplished women, completely different worldviews. And so I always say, with all due respect to Sheryl Sandberg, because she's incredibly impressive, to the point of hard work, like there's only so much you can lean in. And I feel that still today, even though it's 2016, the business world, sort of the corporate business world, I always say the default system is male. So I don't know if anybody's left-handed, but it ain't easy. You have to figure out where you're going to sit at the dinner table, and scissors don't work the same way, and it's a right-handed person's world, and that's what it's like for women in business. And so I feel that women need to lean in for sure, but we need to make institutional changes. Companies need to make institutional changes where the default system isn't always male.